one talent that is going to be going through the NFL draft process next year, in all likelihood. I who knows at this point, because he does have 2 years of eligibility remaining. But Duke quarterback Darien Mensah has officially committed to Miami. He visited the program on Tuesday and spent some time around Coral Gables and the Miami program with Cooper Barkate, their really productive wide receiver, his top wide receiver at Duke this past year. And they were able to get their time around Mario Cristobal's program, learn about the plan for them. And eventually, by the end of Tuesday, they had a deal in place and an official commitment to land at Miami. So this is a big deal for the Hurricanes to get this one done. They moved around, of course, the enrollment schedule with Darien Mensah and Cooper Barkate, having been kind of after that enrollment deadline for the Miami, for the school portion of it, because these guys still go to school and do all that. So there were a lot of balls in the air, but Duke and Darien Mensah did reach that settlement Monday after we got off the air, and the terms were not disclosed. I'm sure there's money being, forked over as far as a buyout goes and things like that. And, Duke does have, a point here where they want the players that they bring in to stand by those deals and execute their end of things, just like Duke executes their ends of things. So Darien Mensah does get that settlement. His agency handled that, and then they get, the deal done with Miami. And for Miami, this is a big deal. Darien Mensah is one of the top quarterbacks in the entire country, one of the top few passers, and in particular returning passers in terms of yardage and production in the country. And he did it with Cooper Barkate, one of the top wide receivers in the entire country last year. Just looking at what he was able to do, just dropping things off, former Harvard transfer, very savvy route runner, and somebody that Darien Mensah clearly trusts. And so when you look at what they're going to be able to do with him, and Malachi Toney coming back next year, this is an explosive offense for Shannon Dawson, and Mark Fletcher returning is obviously going to help as well. They'll have Gerard Pringle back in the backfield too. A lot of talent on that Miami offense. The question is, how well are they going to be able to protect? That's going to be something that impacted Darien Mensah a lot, I think, at Duke, just with his inability at times to really make a ton of plays moving around. It's just not something he's as comfortable with when the pocket is moved. So he still makes plays. You don't do that without you don't lead the ACC in passing without having that type of a level of ability to move around. But sometimes when things do get uncomfortable, there is a little bit of that in his game that still needs to be developed. And with Cooper Barkate coming with him to Miami, that's going to help him feel a little bit more comfortable in this new setting, in this new scene that he's going to be in with the Hurricanes. Because we saw Carson Beck come in and he didn't have spring. Darien Mensah is going to have spring. That'll help. But they do have a lot of work to be done now, and getting him developed and ready for this upcoming season still, because he's not a finished product. And that's the exciting thing if you're a Miami fan, is Darien Mensah is not a finished product. He's not, this Carson Beck, which, even coming off injury, you kind of knew exactly what you were going to get in a sense from him, because that's who he is. Darien Mensah making the move from Tulane to Duke last year, and the jump in production that he had at the same time. Duke did lose 5 games last year. There were games when Darien Mensah did not play up to certainly what his money situation is, but also just as a whole, and as a high level starting quarterback. So there were some moments where he was able to kind of pad his passing yardage a touch, but nonetheless very, very talented passer that's going to be surrounded by a lot of talent at Miami that Mario Cristobal is assembling. And Miami continues to hit the transfer portal here at the quarterback position. This marks 3 straight years that they've gone after a transfer quarterback, Carson Beck, and then Cam Ward, of course. And this is now in the era where you have to wonder if this is just going to be what they do and what space they play in at the quarterback position. They might be a team that dabbles at the top of the high school quarterback market. But also, I think Mario Cristobal has shown with his team, they have a very specific quarterback in mind, and a quarterback, uh, I would say, who wants to manage the game. Like, I'd be intrigued to look at when we fast forward to the end of 2026, just how many yards Darien Mensah has thrown for, how many touchdowns, where that ranks. Are people going to be sitting back and saying, "Wow, what a job Darien Mensah did orchestrating a team and leading them back into the college football playoff. He took a back seat to a strong run game, got the ball in space to Malachi Tony, to Cooper Barkate, and guys like that." Or is it going to be he was still a little too aggressive? He didn't make some plays when he needed, and Miami is maybe sitting at home and fell just short of a college football playoff appearance again. That is going to be all on his shoulders, because when you're going to command the amount of money that Darien Mensah is going to make, you're going to have to produce, or else people are going to react the way fans do in the NFL when you bring in high priced free agents and they don't pan out. So it is national championship or bust for Miami at this point. That is where they're at in the Mario Cristobal era. That's what these fans want. That's what they almost got a couple of Mondays ago now in Hard Rock Stadium, and they'll look to be back in the college football playoff this year with Darien Mensah at the helm. Cooper Barkate comes with him from Duke, and you can't really sleep on this addition in the Miami wide receiver room as well, because he came over from Harvard, where he was spent a few seasons over there playing for them and in the Ivy League, and he showed his smarts, right off the bat at Duke, coming in, having back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and had 72 receptions for 1,106 yards, 7 touchdowns in 2025, catching all those passes from Darien Mensah. High volume guy, very similar. If you kind of pair him with a Malachi Tony, you can run mesh all day, which is kind of where Shannon Dawson in that scheme derives from, the air raid. That's going to be something that opposing defenses are really going to have a hard time containing, because mesh is such, I think, a relatively easy concept to defend on paper. But when you're in the heat of battle and you're running those crossing routes, and teams that do them and teams that do them well, they get so good at finding those natural picks and avoiding the pass interference calls and doing all of those things to really create separation and create that space for those wide receivers to get the ball in space and make big plays. And when you have Cooper Barkade, who's done it at the ACC level, you have Malachi Tony, who's done it at the ACC level at a high level, you're going to be looking at those two receivers and you're going to say, okay, who's got who and how do we slow this down? And it's not a concept as well that takes a lot of time to develop. And with Darien Mensah having that experience with Cooper Barkate, now just having to tag team it with Malachi Tony, you're looking at a fun offense that I think that was probably where it hurt just a little bit this season, where at times you looked at where Miami stalled out. That was the issues, that I think they didn't have a secondary guy. And I don't want to say as a whole, and I don't want to say that it was, overly, um, you know, aggressive as far as how much it held this Miami offense back, but it did feel like at times they did not have that go-to player, or enough go-to players offensively to run some of those concepts and keep the ball moving. Carson Beck, and case in point, kind of last drive, there were a couple moments where he dropped it off, but he eventually took that last shot probably because he felt he needed to, and gets picked off by a great Indiana defense. So it is a talented duo that is now in Miami, not only from the quarterback wide receiver position. That's a three-headed monster when you add in Darien Mensah with Cooper Barkade and Malachi Tony. But Malachi Tony and Cooper Barkade, two of the best duos in the ACC and maybe the entire country at the wide receiver position. Miami was not done. They did add another transfer from the portal as well. Oregon State defensive back Conrad Hussey did transfer to Miami. He spent 1 year with Oregon State after coming over from Florida State. So he flips over from the rivalry side of things in a sense, just took a gap year over there playing for the Beavers. played in 3 games this season, 5 tackles, uh, 27 games over 3 years, though. So he's had a lot of experience, 45 tackles, half tackle for loss, 1 pick, and 3 pass breakups, a fumble recovery, 2 forced fumbles. He's from St. Thomas Aquinas down there in Fort Lauderdale, so he gets right back in his backyard. He was a 4-star prospect coming out of the 2023 class, and he is certainly somebody that Miami is looking for a depth piece, a depth add. And when you have the secondary that they've had and some of the young talent that you see coming up with that team, Jabari Antoine comes to mind, who played a lot in the semifinals and national championship game. You're going to have a really, really impressive group back there, and just continuing to stack up depth is what stands out to me for this Miami team as they again look to make a run back to a national championship and